Hello and welcome. I'm Coach Maura, and I'm going to be walking you through a new series that I'm creating all about macronutrients and how it affects your body, why we need each macronutrient, which is carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So, spoiler alert. So we're going to go into detail about that and then dive into more about your metabolism. So I hope you enjoy. Here's the thing. Over the years, I've worked with hundreds of women in our season of life. 50s, 60s, 70s, and I hear the same thing over and over. I eat pretty healthy. I don't understand why the scale isn't moving, or I feel like I'm doing everything right and nothing's changing. And 9 times out of 10, when we actually sit down and look at what's going on in the plate in front of us, there's a gap. And it's not because you're doing something wrong, it's most likely that no one ever taught you how to actually see what you're eating. So that's what this series is for. We're going to go back to basics, real practical, no fluff basics. And today we're going to talk about tracking, why it matters, how to start, and what is the single most important skill underneath it, which is knowing your portion sizes. So in the next video, we'll build on this and talk about the macronutrients, which are protein, carbs, and fat, and why our body needs all three. So grab a cup of coffee or water, get comfortable, and let's get into it. So let's start here, because I know some of your stomachs just dropped at the word tracking, and I hear you. But for a lot of women, tracking brings up bad memories like diet culture, obsessive calorie counting, food guilt, and that's not what we're going to be doing here. Tracking isn't about restriction. It's not about perfection. It's not about punishment for eating that cookie. Tracking is just information, and it's the difference between guessing and knowing. Here's an example that I use with my clients. So let's say you're driving someplace and it's totally new and you don't have a GPS. You kind of know the general direction, you know it's that way, and maybe you can get there eventually, but maybe you take a lot of wrong turns. And now imagine that you turn the GPS on, same destination, but you know exactly how to get there. You know exactly what's ahead of you. And you can course correct if you get turned around. So that's what tracking does with your nutrition. So it's your GPS. And here's the honest truth. This is backed by research, not just my opinion. So study after study shows that most people, when asked to estimate what they're eating without tracking, they're wildly off. And not just a little, we're talking underestimating by 20, 30, 40% a day. And it's not because they're trying to be sneaky or lying. It's because their brains are genuinely bad at estimating portions, especially foods that we eat all the time. We stop seeing them. So if you've ever said, I really don't eat that much and I still weigh the same, I believe that you feel that way. And I'm also telling you gently that it's very likely that you're eating more than what you think. Probably less protein than you think, or possibly both. So tracking is how we find out for sure instead of guessing. And there's a second reason that tracking matters. And this one is especially important for people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. So it's for our consistency. So our metabolism, our hormones, our muscle mass, all of it is shifting in this time of our life. What worked for us in our 30s doesn't work the same way anymore. And that means the margin for close enough gets smaller and smaller. Tracking gives the precision that our body actually needs right now to build strength, to protect your metabolism, and to see real results. Now, I want to be clear about something, and I'm not asking you to track for the rest of your life. Think of it like training wheels. So you track intensely for a period of time so that you can build that skill of accurately eyeballing portions. Eventually, our eyes get trained, and you look at a chicken breast and you know it's 4 ounces without a scale. But you can't get to that intuitive place without going through the training phase first. There are no shortcuts to the skill, but the skill absolutely can become second nature. Okay, so if tracking's the GPS and portion size is the fuel gauge, it's the very first skill that we build before we even talk about calories or macros or any of that, because here's the truth. You cannot track accurately if you don't know how much food is actually in front of you. So step one, and I say this with much love, if you do not already own a kitchen food scale, please pause this video and order one today. They're very inexpensive and they last forever. And it's genuinely the single best $20 investment that you'll make in this process. This is mine. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to weigh in grams and ounces. And you have a tare button that resets it back to 0. So let me show you exactly how to use it, because this is where most people get it wrong or get intimidated and give up before they even start. So step one is to put an empty bowl or a plate on the scale. Step two is to hit tare. That will reset it so it's only going to weigh the food that we put in. And step three is to put your food in it and look at the weight. It sounds almost too simple, and it's kind of the point. We've made this so much more complicated than in our heads of what it actually is. Now here's a detail that trips people up a lot. Meat, rice, oats, pasta, you generally want to weigh those when it's raw, so before cooking, because that's how the nutrition information on the package is. And so when we track it, that's how it's calculated. And cooking changes the weight. So 4 ounces of raw chicken breast might weigh closer to 3 ounces once it's cooked, because it does lose some water weight. So if you weigh it after cooking and log it as 4 ounces, you're going to be off. But if you're eating out or eating something already cooked and you can't weigh it raw, that's okay. We'll get to that in just a second. And sometimes you can actually pick if it's raw or cooked when you're logging it. So we have control. Let me give you a few real examples from real conversations I've had with clients, because I think that's where it clicks for people. So peanut butter, almost everyone I work with, whether they weigh their food or whether it's the first time, they're always shocked. They think a tablespoon looks like a small dollop. So when you actually measure it, it's a true tablespoon is just a heaping rounded spoonful. And most people are using 2, sometimes 3 times that without even realizing it. So peanut butter can be healthy, but it's also calorically dense. So this one adds up pretty fast. Olive oil and cooking spray, same. A glug from a bottle can easily be 2 or 3 tablespoons. And once you actually measure it with a spoon or weigh it and realize how much sneaks in during cooking, it's amazing. Cheese. A serving is usually about an ounce, which is the size of your thumb. Okay, so most people's mental picture of a serving of cheese is 2 or 3 times that. And none of this is about shame, I promise you. I've been shocked by my own portions plenty of times over the years. This is about awareness. And here's the beautiful part. After a few weeks of consistently weighing regular go-to foods, something starts to happen. You start recognizing what 4 ounces of chicken breast looks like on your plate without a scale. You develop what I call portion control eyes, and that's the whole goal. So the scale is a teacher, not a permanent roommate. And now real life happens. You're at your daughter's house for a dinner, you're at a restaurant, or you're traveling. You're not going to bring a food scale to that Thanksgiving meal or that celebration. So here's a simple visual method that you can use wherever you are traveling. You bring your hand. A palm-sized portion with about the thickness of your palm is roughly a serving of protein. That is a chicken breast, fish, meat. A cupped hand is roughly the size of 1 cup of carbohydrates. A closed fist is roughly the serving of vegetable, and your thumb is roughly 1 serving of fat or cheese. So it's not going to be as precise as a scale, but it's dramatically more accurate than pure guessing, and it travels with you everywhere you go. My last tip on this section is log your food as you normally eat it. Not at the end of the day, but while you're eating it. Trying to remember everything. Our memories are really just not as good as we think, especially with the little things. The handful of nuts, the taste, the bite off of your husband's plate. Real-time logging, even a quick voice note or a picture, a photo, is going to seem so much more accurate at the end of the day than your recall. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Why does knowing your exact portion size even matter? And why go through all this trouble? So here's the answer. Because the amount of food you eat only tells us half the story. The other half is what kind of food it is. This is where the macronutrient comes in. So macronutrient is just a fancy word for the 3 categories of food that everything breaks down to in our body: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And everything we eat is made up of some combination of these 3. And once you know how to weigh, measure your food accurately, which we just covered, the next step is to understanding the why for specific mixes of protein, carbs, and fat. So that actually matters for a woman, especially in our season of life. And that's what we're going to be covering in the next section. And it's honestly one of my favorite topics to teach. So let's break down each one, because I promise you, once this clicks, much of the confusion around healthy eating disappears. So I am going to start with protein, because if there's one thing I want you to walk away from this video remembering, it's that protein is your non-negotiable. For women our age especially. Protein is what builds and repairs muscle. And starting in our 40s and accelerating through our 50s and 60s and beyond, we naturally start losing muscle mass. It's called sarcopenia, and it happens to everyone unless we actively fight against it. How? I'm glad you asked. It's resistance training. Muscle isn't just about looking toned. Muscle is what keeps our metabolism running, protecting your joints, keeping you strong enough to carry your groceries, get up from the floor, chase your grandkids, all around. And it's directly tied to your bone density and your independence as you age. So most women I work with are eating far less protein than they need. So often less than half of what their body actually needs and requires to maintain and build muscle. And it's usually not because they're eating badly, but it's because protein just isn't the front and center in most of how we were raised to build a plate. So protein also happens to be the most satiating macronutrient, meaning it keeps you full for a longer period of time than carbs or fat. So when women increase their protein, they're often shocked at how much less their snacking or their cravings have gone down, even without trying. So now let's talk about carbohydrates, because I know this one has a complicated reputation. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. Carbohydrates are your body's preferred and most efficient source of energy, especially for your brain and fueling any kind of movement for strength training. The quality and type matter. A sweet potato and a candy bar are technically both carbohydrates, but they behave very differently once we ingest that. So a fiber-rich carb like a vegetable, fruit, oats, whole grains, slow down our digestion. They help regulate our blood sugar and support our gut, which becomes even more important as we age. But here's what I really want you to hear. Cutting carbs entirely is not the answer, and it's usually not even sustainable. Our body, and especially our brain, our workouts, they all need that fuel. The goal isn't zero carbs. It's the right amount of carbs from the right sources in the right portion, which again is exactly why we just spent all this time learning to weigh and measure and figure that out. And finally, fat. For a lot of us who grew up in the fat-free era of the 80s and 90s, this one requires a little bit of unlearning. So dietary fat is actually essential, meaning your body cannot make it on its own if you don't get it from foods. So fat is critical for hormone production, and that matters enormously as we move through perimenopause and menopause and beyond. When our hormones are already shifting, it's also essential for absorbing certain vitamins. So A, D, E, and K are all our fat soluble, meaning without enough dietary fat, you literally cannot absorb them properly, no matter how many vegetables you eat. So fat also supports our brain health and keeps us satisfied after a meal. The key, like with everything else, is the portion. So fat is calorically dense, more than double the calories per gram of protein or carbohydrates. And that's exactly why the thumb-size portion for that food and our food scale we talked about matter so much here specifically. Here's the big picture takeaway. Your body needs all three of these macronutrients working together. Protein to build and protect your muscles, carbs to fuel your energy and your workouts, and fat to support your hormones and help you absorb key nutrients. None of them is the villain. The magic isn't in the elimination of one. It's in the understanding of the portions well enough to get all three in the right amounts for your body in this season of life. So here's your homework this week. So getting that food scale if you don't have one, and just start practicing. Weigh your chicken, weigh your rice, weigh your peanut butter, and I promise you it will surprise you. You don't have to change a single thing you're eating. Just start seeing it clearly. And in our next video, we're going to build directly on this and talk about how to figure out exactly how much protein, how many carbs, and what your fat content is that your body needs. So real numbers, not guesswork. So until then, remember, please start to weigh and make sure that you are just eating normally, tracking the exact thing that you always eat. This is just a starting point. There is absolutely no judgment, but we want to get it as close to real life as possible. So you are going to do amazing. I will see you in the next video, and have a wonderful day.